Few individuals were aware of the extent to which his interests encompassed a wide variety of topics, and the extent to which he was supportive of an incredibly diverse assortment of topics. Over the course of several decades, Prince Philip and Queen Elizabeth have consistently demonstrated their love and support for one another. On the other hand, Prince Philip made a stunning choice after 70 years of marriage. However, he had changed his mind about living with the Queen. Following this surprise move, the general public was left wondering what had gone wrong. Did you make this choice on your own? Do you think there was more to the story? It took many years before the truth was finally revealed. However, in a shocking disclosure, Princess Anne, together with King Charles and Prince Andrew, has finally disclosed the true reason behind their father's departure from the family. As we unearth the previously unknown narrative of why Prince Philip did not live with the Queen in Buckingham Palace, we encourage you to stay tuned. It was just revealed by Princess Anne. This is the reason why Prince Philip did not reside with the Queen. The revelation that Princess Anne, the sole daughter of Prince Philip and Queen Elizabeth, has made has left many people in a state of utter disbelief. There have been a variety of hypotheses put up over the course of many years on the reasons behind Prince Philip's decision to leave Buckingham Palace and not reside with the Queen during his final years. However, the truth has at long last been revealed. Princess Anne, who is frequently referred to be her father's favorite, has revealed the true reason for her father's decision, and her brothers, Prince Charles and Prince Andrew, have backed up her assertions. As we unearth the complete tale, make sure to stay tuned. The connection between Princess Anne and her father, Prince Philip, was rather close, in contrast to the formal and distant relationship that is typically observed in royal families. She was given the nickname her father's girl, most likely due to the fact that she and her father had characteristics such as being loud, abrasive, stubborn, strong-willed, and caustic, as well as having a sharp sense of humor, which frequently came at the expense of other people. You could say that they both took pleasure in being fooled, and that they had little patience with people who did not comprehend things as fast as they did. However, what impressed me the most was their unflinching loyalty. Both Prince Philip and Princess Anne were unable to notice anything that was amiss with the other. Instead, they remained deeply respectful of one another while engaging in humorous criticism of one another. During the course of her life, Princess Anne was able to observe the relationship that existed between her parents, whereas her brothers were frequently engaged with their royal responsibilities. Anne was aware of the truth and had the opportunity to witness directly what was hidden behind the flawless smiles and the flawless royal marriage that her parents brought to the world. Of course, that is not all. Additionally, Prince Philip confided in his daughter about some of the difficulties he encountered during his marriage to Queen Elizabeth, Queen of England. It is necessary, however, to go back to the beginning, to the time when all began, even before Princess Anne and her brothers were born, in order to have a complete understanding of the reasons why Prince Philip made the decision to go away. The first time that Queen Elizabeth, who was originally known as Princess Elizabeth, met Prince Philip, a Greek prince who was living in exile, was at a wedding in 1934. She was only 8 years old, while he was 13 years old. Nevertheless, it wasn't until 5 years later that they finally got the chance to reconnect with one another. The Princess Elizabeth was 13 years old at the time, while Prince Philip was 18 years old. On the other hand, the princess was not by herself. She was accompanied by her sister and dad as they traveled to Dartmouth, Devon, to see the Britannia Royal Naval College. Philip was one of the cadets who they were supposed to meet with, and they were supposed to meet with him. On the other hand, things did not go according to plan because there was a mumps and chickenpox outbreak occurred during the stay. In place of going to a chapel service as they were scheduled to, they decided to spend some time at the headmaster's residence, where Prince Philip came to provide entertainment for the young princesses. He was one of the individuals who did not succumb to the virus's infection. As time went on, Philip became bored with remaining within the mansion, and he requested that the princesses come out into the open air. Rather than that, he started playing croquet, jumping over tennis nets, and demonstrating a carefree and athletic temperament. This managed to capture the attention of Princess Elizabeth. As soon as she experienced that moment, she fell in love. Subsequently, she asserted that after that day, she never again had any desire to be with anyone else. After this experience, the princess had a strong teenage infatuation on Philip, and she started exchanging letters with him while he was serving in the Royal Navy during the war years. This occurred while Philip was serving in the military. As a further demonstration of her devotion for him, Elizabeth even kept a picture of him in her bedroom. When Philip returned from his service in the Pacific Theater in 1946, his connection with Princess Elizabeth had already begun to flourish. On the grounds of Balmoral, he made his proposal to her in the month of June. To have been spared in the war and seen victory, to have been given the chance to rest and to readjust myself, to have fallen in love completely and unreservedly, makes all of one's personal and even the world's troubles seem small and petty, he said in a letter that was dated back to 1946. He was referring to the fact that he had been spared during the war and had witnessed victory. Nevertheless, in spite of the proposal, King George VI, who was the father of Queen Elizabeth, was hesitant about the idea of a marriage between the two of them. Elizabeth was too young, and he was afraid that she would settle for the first man she laid eyes on. There is a possibility that she would interact with another person and change her attitude about Philip. Because of this, the royal family did not disclose any information regarding Philip's intention to marry Elizabeth. To add insult to injury, there was some opposition to Philip's idea within the royal family. In spite of the fact that Philip is a member of the royal family and is a direct descendant of Queen Victoria, both Elizabeth and Philip are third cousins. Many people believed that Prince Philip was not suitable for marrying Princess Elizabeth because he was too rough, too unpolished, too German, too Greek, and too un-English. However, Elizabeth was adamant about it. She was resolute in her decision to marry Philip, and she had already made up her mind about him. In July 1947, 1 year after Elizabeth's 21st birthday, a formal announcement was made regarding their engagement. This announcement was made after Elizabeth had reached the age of 21 Donnet. Before he could marry Elizabeth, he was required to give up his royal titles in Denmark and Greece and join the Church of England. This was done in preparation for their wedding. As a result of his undying affection for Elizabeth, Philip did this without any hesitation. Although Philip had been baptized in the Greek Orthodox Church, he was not officially admitted into the Church of England until October 3, 1947, when the Archbishop of Canterbury made the official announcement. A new anglicized version of his surname, Mountbatten, was also adopted by him. Princess Elizabeth wed Prince Philip in Westminster Abbey in London on November 20, 1947. Elizabeth's wedding took place. After that, they went on their honeymoon to the Broadlands, which is located in Hampshire, England. The Broadlands is Edward Mountbatten's home, which is Philip's uncle. Philip, on the other hand, had no idea that his life was going to undergo a transformation that he could never have anticipated. Following his wedding, Prince Philip maintained his service in the Navy, where he made rapid advancements in his career. After a year, they welcomed their first child, a male named Charles, and then a daughter named Anne, at the same time. As a result of Philip's successful naval career, he was eventually assigned to the island of Malta. At the same time as the children remained in England, Princess Elizabeth made the journey to be with him. Over the course of a brief period of time, they lived a life that was rather typical. Yet, everything in their lives was about to take a different path. In the year 1952, King George collapsed and passed away. In only 5 years after they had tied the knot, something occurred. The lives of Elizabeth and Philip were turned completely upside down. Both Elizabeth, who was just 25 years old at the time, and Philip, who was 30 years old at the time, had to adjust to the new reality that had been presented to them. The idea that they would have more time to live their own lives and enjoy themselves before Elizabeth arrived to the throne was something that they had anticipated. However, fate had other things in store for us. Now Elizabeth was going to become queen, and Philip, her husband, was going to decide what he wanted to do with his life. Not a monarch, but someone who would remain in the background of his wife, Queen Elizabeth, was the person in question. Even though they had known this from the beginning, it was going to have a significant impact on their entire relationship. As a result of Elizabeth's ascension, he was forced to give up whatever desire he might have had to advance his career within the Royal Navy. It is difficult to imagine how difficult it would have been for a man who was accustomed to commanding ships to be suddenly demoted to a supporting role. In addition, let us not forget that this was the 1950s, a period of time in which it was highly uncommon for a wife to be in a position of authority and control over her husband. Given that Philip's wife was the most senior person in the country, this was an even greater challenge for him because it meant that duty took precedence over family. This episode marked the beginning of a struggle that Philip would continue to face throughout his entire life, a struggle that would eventually play a role in his decision to live away from the Queen in his subsequent years. However, how did it come about? Continue to stay here to discover out the difficulties that come with living a royal life. While Elizabeth and Philip were having a safari vacation in Kenya, Philip broke the news to Elizabeth that her father had passed away. Elizabeth had a clear understanding of what was required of her, and they made a hasty return to the United Kingdom. Elizabeth was elevated to the position of Queen Elizabeth II upon their arrival. However, Philip's title did not alter at any point. He did not have the title of King Consort. In spite of this, Prince Philip remained steadfast in his commitment to his wife, quitting his job in the Royal Navy in order to devote himself to serving the monarchy. However, this was only the beginning of a great deal of upheaval. They then relocated from their previous home, Clarence House, to Buckingham Palace, which was their new home. The ceremony of Queen Elizabeth's coronation took place at Westminster Abbey in London on June 2, 1953, exactly 1 year after she had risen to the throne. The Archbishop of Canterbury was the first person to kneel in front of the new monarch, and Philip was the first person to make a commitment to be her liegeman for the rest of her life. However, was he really capable of being this? In order to provide support for Queen Elizabeth II, it was easier for a man to say that he would agree to live under the control of a woman than it was for him to actually commit to doing so. In addition, Philip had to get used to the idea of going a few feet behind his wife in public rather than strolling alongside her. Later, he disclosed that he had the expectation that he would have a lengthy career in the Navy. Nevertheless, it became immediately apparent that there was no possibility of that happening, and he was forced to make concessions. Philip came to terms with his new circumstances and made an effort to make the most of them. After Elizabeth became queen, however, she and Philip began to have disagreements from the beginning of their relationship. One of the most significant disagreements occurred when Louis Ducey Mountbatten, Philip's uncle, declared that the House of Mountbatten now reigned in England. This was one of the most important controversies. The implication was that because Queen Elizabeth was married, her children would inherit the surname of her husband by virtue of their marriage. On the other hand, Queen Mary, Elizabeth's grandmother, and Winston Churchill, the Prime Minister, did not concur with this. In order to ensure that the legacy of her father would be preserved, they insisted that Queen Elizabeth and her descendants would continue to be ruled by the House of Windsor. Philip took this decision very personally and expressed his displeasure by stating that he was nothing more than a bloody amoeba. He also claimed that he was the only man in the country who was not permitted to carry his name onto his offspring. The words he spoke conveyed his exasperation and the difficulty he was having in establishing his identity inside the monarchy, as well as the difficulties that were still to come. After listening to what her husband had to say, Queen Elizabeth made the decision to alter some of the traditions that had been in place for a very long time. The announcement that her descendants will be given the surname Mountbatten-Windsor, which is a mix of her surname and the surname of Prince Philip, was made by her in February of 1960. During the time when Elizabeth was the monarch, Prince Philip assumed the role of royal consort. Nevertheless, the nature of his responsibilities was not quite obvious. In the past, he shared with Geeksbrandroth that he was frequently considered to be a refugee of the marriage. An institution that was centered on his wife left him in the shadows, despite his efforts to make the most of his position. He struggled to establish a significant place for himself inside the institution, which left him in the background. The experience that Prince Philip had as the royal consort was one that he described as being one of trial and error. In spite of the fact that he was not the first royal consort in history, he was confronted with difficulties that did not have a clear pattern to follow. It was also stated by Prince Philip that when he inquired about the expectations placed upon him in his role as royal consort, people did not provide a genuine response, and instead merely looked blank. There was, however, one thing that Philip was certain of. The first thing he was obligated to do was to provide the highest level of service to his wife, Queen Elizabeth. Similar like his daughter, Princess Anne, Prince Philip possessed a personality that was active, driven, and outspoken. This stood in stark contrast to his personality, however. He approached it with complete and full devotion. In the early years of his reign, Prince Philip prioritized the modernization of the monarchy out of concern that it would one day become a museum exhibit. However, he encountered opposition from the old guard, who were adamant on upholding tradition. This did not come without its share of difficulties. In spite of this, Philip did not lose his mind with his beliefs, and as a consequence, this led to a great deal of success. The idea that the coronations of Elizabeth II should be televised live on television was one that he advocated. He stated that it would be inappropriate for the ritual to be presented in the same manner as a theatrical play. It is evidence of his foresight, as more than 20 million people watched the ceremony that was broadcast on television,